Meet Grant. Grant is artistic. Grant cares about the environment. Grant is studious. Grant is a good Samaritan. Grant is a victim of reverse discrimination in higher education. In an interview with him, he revealed his story.
My name is Grant Pace. I'm a senior at Park Hill South. I'm the valedictorian. I'm a national merit finalist. I have a 36 on the ACT. I've taken 16 AP classes. I've taken tests for, 8 of them, and I've gotten all 5s and a 4. Extracurriculars, I'm the president of the debate team. I've qualified to nationals 3 times. I was district champ this year. I've won conference twice. I'm the president of NHS. I'm co-concert master in orchestra. I play violin. I do art pretty heavily. I won a national art competition 2 years in a row. And then I do a bunch of other random clubs like National English Honor Society, Tri-M, Environmental Club, Natural Helpers, things like that. Most of the service that I've done has been through the school organizations that I'm in. Like as NHS president, I have to go to a bunch of events and sponsor them. So,
did you apply to any highly selective institutions? If so, were you accepted, deferred, or denied?
You betcha. Okay, so I applied to 18 different schools. I applied to 6 Ivy League schools. I got accepted to 2 of them, Columbia and Brown. I'm on the wait list at Cornell and Princeton, and I got rejected from Harvard and Yale. I'm also on the wait list at Stanford, MIT, U Chicago, Amherst, Pomona, and maybe a couple other wait lists that I can't think of off the top of my head.
Okay. Do you believe race and or gender played a role in this decision?
I would say that it did play a part, but I wouldn't say that it was necessarily like a huge part. Of course, I don't know exactly what the admissions officers were thinking when they looked at my application, but I do know that it's something that they look for in terms of diversity. And also outside of just having like numbers on a sheet of paper, they also look for people who have gone through adversity and like overcome things. And as like a privileged white male, I just inherently don't have to go through as much as someone who is maybe a minority or lower socioeconomic status. To my knowledge, most of the schools that I'm considering and have gotten into don't really take race into account for financial need because it's based solely on financial need. But there are other schools like Duke, for example. Like I got into Duke and they had like specific scholarships for minorities, which I wasn't eligible for. If I were a minority, I think that it's possible that maybe at one or a couple of the schools, it could have been enough to bump me from like waitlist status to actually getting accepted. But that's not anything that I know for sure. It's just a possibility. Everything is so close with schools like that. Like when you get to the top applicants and like ciphering through like who you want and who's going to be on the wait list. So something that small could have made a difference, but it also couldn't have. I don't know.
Now let's meet another highly qualified college applicant. Meet Ryan. Ryan is dedicated. Ryan is smart. Ryan is athletic. Ryan is a good Samaritan. Ryan is social. Ryan is a victim of reverse discrimination in higher education. Now meet Anthony. Anthony lives in Miami, so he's being interviewed via FaceTime. The biggest difference between him and Ryan is that Anthony is half Cuban. So let's compare the two side by side.
I have a 34 on my ACT, about a 4.3 GPA. I'm in the top 5 for the class rank. I've done lots of clubs. I'm an officer for 3 or 4. Vice president of DECA, competed at nationals.
My GPA, my weighted GPA, is a 5.67 on a 6-point scale. My unweighted is a 3.94 on a 4-point scale. My class rank is 1 of 270. My SAT score is 280. I've done a lot of volunteering with animal shelters and stuff, like fostering kittens, like walking dogs and playing with dogs and such. I've been pretty involved with my student government. I do this social justice, civic leadership, peer discussion forum that meets virtually, a bi-weekly basis.
I was denied to most of the selective schools I applied to. I was denied to Harvard, Princeton, Penn, and Stanford. And then I was waitlisted to Berkeley, and I got into Middlebury, which is like a junior Ivy, so it's not quite as selective.
I originally applied to Harvard, Yale, Stanford, Middlebury, Amherst, WashU, and the University of Florida. And I was accepted to Harvard, Yale, Stanford, Middlebury, and Amherst.
And do you believe that race and/or gender played a role in this decision?
Absolutely, yeah. I think that the fact that I come from a minority background. My mother was born in Cuba. She's an immigrant country. My father is white, so I am half white, half Hispanic. But for all intents and purposes, my application, I was viewed as a Hispanic applicant. And I'm very aware that affirmative action is a very influential policy in college admissions. And in light of my Hispanic background, I know I was viewed differently than if I were just completely white, or even if I were completely Asian or black or what have you.
And do you believe that your race and/or gender played a role in this decision?
I think it definitely did. I mean, if you just look at statistics, they don't really add up to the statistics of the whole country.
You see, colleges have created an initiative for diversity in their admissions process. The Ivy League schools are heading this cause. For example, among admitted students to Brown University, 45% self-identified as African American, Latino, Asian American, or Native American. At Penn University, 45% of the class identified themselves as students of color. This is a recurring theme in Ivy League schools, and this is a glaring difference from the 77.4% of white people in the U.S. Also, a Princeton study based on SAT scores showed that, on average, African Americans accepted to Princeton received a bonus of 230 points, meaning that the average SAT score for African American Princeton students was 230 points lower than their white counterparts. People of Hispanic background received a 185-point bonus. Asian students, however, got the short end of the deal, receiving a 50-point deduction in their score, meaning that they had to score 50 points higher in order to compete with their white counterparts.
And so there's some discrepancies there that don't make sense to me. I applied to financial aid for all the schools. I got a decent amount of money from Middlebury and Pepperdine because both of those are private schools, so they kind of give money more willingly and have a lot more to give.
I've applied for financial aid. I've only heard back from Harvard and Stanford so far from their financial aid offices. But for them, they'd be covering all of my expenses. So room and board, housing, tuition and stuff.
And do you feel that race played a role in the money you received?
Well, for financial aid from Harvard and Stanford, absolutely not. I think that I'm very aware that their financial aid office is entirely need-based. It's not merit-based. They're looking strictly at my financial situation and not my ethnic background. I think it would be weird if they did that, and I'm very okay with the fact that they do that completely objectively.
And do you feel that the money you did or did not receive was adversely impacted by your race?
Yeah, I would say so, for sure. I mean, it's not going to be easy to pay for any of the schools that I want to go to now. I didn't get as much as I feel like I probably should have. for considering what I've done academically and outside of the classroom.
And I applied for the Gates Millennium Scholarship, for which I'm a finalist for, but I don't hear back if I actually get the scholarship until like next weekish. It's not like a set in stone date, so I'm waiting to hear back from that. For Gates Millennium, you can't apply to it if you're Caucasian. It's only for minorities, so blacks, Hispanics, Asians, and such. And Gates Millennium is also comprised of a lot of like smaller member organizations. Well, not comprised of, but they work with like other organizations dedicated specifically to like a single cohort or demographic. So like there's a Hispanic scholarship fund they work with, a scholarship fund for black students, and so on. And so they look at the Hispanic students compared to the other Hispanic students, and like the black students compared to the other black students. So however much that might have influenced me, I don't know. But again, I was from what I understand, I was only reviewed as compared to other Hispanic applicants.
Now, we're not saying Anthony is undeserving of his admission and scholarships. He is exceptionally qualified and deserves what he got. But certainly both he and Ryan had comparable resumes, yet Anthony was more widely admitted and received much more financial aid than Ryan. Many scholarships are purely merit and need-based. However, there are many specifically for members of a certain race. There are scholarships awarded by outside organizations like the National Achievement Scholarship Program or the Gates Millennium Scholarship Anthony applied to, and there are scholarships awarded by the university themselves. For example, the University of Missouri has 4. The Diversity Award, the George C. Brooks Scholarships, the Dr. Donald Suggs Scholarships, and the Transition Grant. Now, here are some of our peers' opinions on affirmative action.
So, do you think it's fair for colleges to have extra or admit people and give people scholarships based off of race and gender as opposed to just merit?
Merit should definitely play a huge part in both. For scholarships, I'm not sure, because like Native American scholarships, I guess, are awesome. I can't really complain about black scholarships because I've applied to a bunch of them. But for admissions, no, I don't think that you should, like, a black person should get over an equally qualified white person just to fill like a quota, because I think that's more racist even to the black person than not accepting them.
Do I feel like it's fair? Not necessarily. I mean, things that aren't based off purely merit aren't necessarily the fairest. I mean, of course, like it shouldn't be based off anything except your achievements. But I'm gonna say in the same breath, in certain situations, people don't necessarily start at the same level as others in different races. So I'm gonna say sometimes it's okay, but most of the time I think you should just go off merit. So
I believe that certainly there is a basis for merit. For you want to get the person who is most qualified for that job or for that education going into that occupation. They should be the one who should be going into that college. But thinking just based off of scholarships, I believe that, I mean, it is a trend that we see that many minorities are lower income, and I believe that providing scholarships to provide them an opportunity to better excel in their education so that they may be admitted and pay off for their classes and not be limited by their economic standing. I think that's something that's necessary to have.
The consensus of the minority peers that we interviewed seems to be that admittance based on race is unfair, but the distribution of scholarships based on race is more acceptable due to the fact that minorities on average are more disadvantaged financially than whites. However, if these preferences were truly meant to remedy disadvantage, they would be given on the basis of economic disadvantage, not on the basis of race. Now let us introduce you to our friend Jacob Cowley. Jacob could not be here for an interview as he is devoting 2 years of his life to a Mormon mission in Los Angeles. He replied to our questions via email, which is the only electronic mode of communication he can use, and he can only use it once a week. At the time of applications, these were his stats. He had a 34 on the ACT, which is equivalent to both Ryan and Anthony's score. He had taken 5 AP classes, in which he had scored all 5s on the tests, and he was currently taking 5 more AP classes. He was involved in a multitude of clubs, including secretary of the senior class, math club, state choir competitions. He went to Decca Nationals and was lightly involved in Lumberjack Club. He had his Eagle Scout award and he played varsity soccer. He was waitlisted at WashU in St. Louis, University of Chicago, and Vanderbilt. He was turned down by Duke and Harvard. He was accepted to KU and the University of Utah, and he got a full tuition scholarship at the University of Utah. And now, to quote him, "I have no intention to write a bitter diatribe against the college admissions process, but I will speak from my limited perspective and experience. Let me begin by saying that I have no qualms with promoting diversity. Quite the opposite, in fact. That being said, there is a difference, however, between having diversity as your goal and having it as your criteria. Before I applied to college, I remember looking through many internet sites for colleges. These sites boasted of many things, including percentages of graduates who get accepted to graduate programs and find jobs, average scores on tests, and also the diversity at the school. This seemed like a nice addition, letting you know that if you come here, you will be surrounded by peers and many different perspectives and cultures, which will really foster a great learning environment. Little did I know that as a male WASP, I was looking at little more than the foreshadowing of my imminent failure. I'm not saying I was the perfect student, but on paper I looked pretty damn close, and the most I got from the upper tier universities that I applied to was being waitlisted. Waitlisting is basically the college app's equivalent of a gold star that says, 'You tried.'" I also want to mention something that really only applies to state schools, but I will say it nonetheless. A state university should be very close to representing the state as far as diversity goes. For example, in a state that is 35% Caucasian, about 35% of the student population at a state university should be Caucasian. These schools should not be trying to overrepresent one ethnicity, all in the noble name of diversity. If a state has a 6% population of Hispanics and their student population is 12% Hispanic, that is just as unfair as if the 35% Caucasian state has 70% Caucasian student body. Being in the majority is hard to seem picked on because there are still so many of us. The problem is not that whites are not admitted to upper-level schools. The problem is that they are underrepresented at upper-level schools. And obviously, private schools have no obligation to any state or nation and can do as they please. But at the end of it all, this is America. These are American schools who should be showing equal consideration to Americans as they are internationals. And they should be showing equal consideration for each and every ethnicity. Honestly, if the admissions process was ethnicity blind, then I have no doubt that the diversity in these private schools would get very close to representing the diversity of our country as a whole, which is exactly how it should be.
I don't necessarily feel like it's fair, not in the sense that I don't agree with affirmative action. It's more that, I don't know, I feel like affirmative action is a solution to like an underlying issue, but it's not a perfect solution. I feel like we need a lot more addressing of why minorities don't have equal opportunities, like fixing the underlying issues like the unequal education, like inner city schools, etc., like the schools that are predominantly ethnic minorities, and the fact that they don't have the same resources and opportunities. And to me, that would be a lot more beneficial for like leveling the playing field, because even with affirmative action, like while I agree with it, it's still like the privileged, like upper echelon minority students that are getting into schools like this through affirmative action. Like, it's not really doing anything to help the people who are like still oppressed and still don't have opportunities at the bottom.
I think it's pretty unfair. I think that it's kind of a system that's hard for middle class white kids to go to school, and I understand why the system's set up the way it is to try to help kids in areas who can't necessarily get the same scores and same opportunities as I have, but to take away from my accomplishments just because I've had opportunities is unfair, because I don't know what I was supposed to do with the situation that I was presented.
I'm not going to apologize for what I have written. This process is so unjustified that it has given me a headache just thinking about it again. Please don't take this the wrong way. My overarching belief is that schools should promote equality, which is defined as the state of being equal, especially in status, rights, and opportunities. My educational opportunities as an individual, not as a race, should be equal. I should never feel I have to work harder and excel more just because I was born into a certain lineage. Yours respectfully, Elder Jacob J. Smooth Cowley.